So welcome everyone to the first episode in a new series of 25th Century podcasts, where we are discussing, among many other things, the future of work, labor, business, and what we will all be doing with our lives in general, in our careers, for what we hope will be the next few generations at least of the future. I have quite a few prestigious guests, an intimidatingly prestigious group of guests around the table right now. First of all, we have Wagner Denuzzo. Wagner has worked in several Fortune 500 companies over the years, the most notable of which being at IBM for quite some time as an advisor and leader in human resources and talent development and talent supply. Wagner has a new book coming out very soon, the issues in which we will be discussing, called Leading to Succeed: Essential Skills for the New Workplace, and we promise that that book will actually have some of the things you will need to learn to succeed, unlike many other books with similar titles out there, whose authors I will not mention because they are not here. We also have with us Luciana Camargo, who has over 25 years experience in the upper end of human resources as well, working at C-suite level relationships, also in IBM at many different divisions at IBM Consulting. IBM Latin America, has served as Vice President of Leadership in IBM Consulting, Vice President of Human Resources in IBM Latin America, one of the few Vice Presidents who actually does work, let alone the important work that you have done. And finally, going around the table, we have Alcely Barroso. Alcely also has been a professional at IBM over the years in their talent management. Her accolades are many at that, working in the IBM Global University programs for Latin America, among many other training and talent development projects. All of your work is remarkable and, dare I say, slightly intimidating, as I said, compared to my own resume, which has many, many great things in its future so far, I think, but that's still in the future. Great achievements you all have here. I would be happy to start the conversation, at this point by saying, first, welcome to everybody and thank you for coming to our humble studio concerns. I'm really glad that you guys could all come and be here and be with us. It's amazing. And welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
So, I also want to, while we are here, briefly thank the sponsors of us here at 25th Century. That is the good folks at Canada Start Hub, the good folks at CIMO, and the good folks at the I2A2, Institut d'Intelligence Artificielle Appliquée. Bienvenue à Canada. For those of us listening internationally, there is the modicum of French necessary for us to qualify as genuine Canadians. And finally, Proxy, a fine institution that we may be talking about at some point later on, if not in this episode, then in future ones as well. So, the first thing I want to do after welcoming you, thanking our sponsors, and beginning our official show is we're here to talk about the future of work, the future of productivity, what it means to be productive. What we're going to do for the next while is just pick at the brains of each of you to bring your knowledge to the fore, because one thing that is really important for us to understand about the future of labor, our future as we think about what our career paths going to look like over the next, decade, 20 years, 30 years. A lot of us are even feeling uncertain out in the world over what our career arc's going to look like over the next 5 years, 1 year, month and a half, depending on, how quickly technological progress moves or appears to move around us. So, Wagner, I want to start with you. Mm-hmm. First of all, and ask, what do you think is the core character of what companies will be looking for if they are truly progressive and forward thinking about what career development is going to mean, given your experience, given your knowledge at some of the sort of industry leading and bigger companies out there? If they're going to adjust to what's coming for real, how are they going to treat their human talent development, and how are they going to encourage the career development of the people who work for them?
That's a big question, but thank you for having me, Adam. I think it's great for us to talk about this. First, it's very important to simplify the way this complexity is impacting all of us. And I think one word that we can synthesize all this is value. How can business leaders, employees, all of us start thinking, what are the value drivers that create the opportunity for us to build new skills, new capabilities that will serve our stakeholders, our customers? So if you have to synthesize all this is value. But how should we think about talent management and this whole idea of organizations have the accountability for employees? Yes, the organizations have the accountability to share access, giving access to employees to understand where the strategy is being the organization, giving access to employees to understand the financials, to understanding the products and solutions that are being thought of for the future, because that gives the employees the agency to understand what is skills that I might need to really solve for the problems that we have ahead of us. So you see, I think the whole idea is a shared accountability between employees and organizations to create the environment and the conditions for people to be able to lead their careers. So careers are going to be very non-linear, as you said. But this non-linear career depends on access to information, data, and understand the context in which you're working.
Yeah.
Especially now because people are working independently as well. So the many talent pools that we have to draw from are not inside your organizations. Sometimes they're going to be outside the organization. Yeah. How do you solve for that? So it's a whole new thinking about how do I compose my workforce? The composition of the workforce is changing, and leaders have to get used to that because leaders need to share their leadership. So everyone in the company has the autonomy to make some decisions timely when they need to make those decisions.
Yeah. I mean, that question of value and career development, I think particularly access is in many ways a concept that, goes beyond a lot of what I at least have seen. Well, let's think about it this way. A very common stereotype that unfortunately comes true in a lot of organizations is that people gain power in companies by controlling access, right? And there's a kind of openness in what you're talking about that, for some business leaders, and, we're talking about not every business leader, certainly, but the ones that perhaps are not well suited to make these kind of adjustments. How do we keep knowledge and access to knowledge from being siloed for the sake of, say, something more traditional, something more hierarchical, but also, I hear what you're saying, and what I'm hearing is that the role of an executive, that the role of a leader in a company has to be about sharing knowledge and sharing access and being open with employees at many levels. And there's a lot of business management techniques that are much more about closing and controlling access. So in terms of convincing people to, change from a management model that might be more about control to a management model that is more about granting access and giving freedom and creating what seems to be a very collaborative atmosphere across ranks, right? And across levels from C to exec to middle to even the frontline starter employees of companies, right? Number one, what does that kind of management look like? And number two, how do you convince someone who might be accustomed to thinking in the old way of doing things, right? That more restricted way of doing things. How do you convince them to kind of open their minds to those possibilities of this more open style of management? And Luciana?
This is why the discussion around culture is so important. So you mentioned about the way of leading. So when you create an environment where people feel that they can be empowered to bring their own perspectives on a solution, and the leader, it's looking for more people, more perspectives to solve complex problem. The leader will be leading in a different way. So no longer controlling what's going to happen or deciding that he will give the direction. He knows the answers for everything. Changing for a style that create an environment that he can leverage the power of knowledge of their organization. So I think this complex world that we have today, there is no way that we can solve in the traditional and past way of doing things. You definitely need an environment that foster more collaboration, more horizontal power in a way that it's not about losing control. It's about deploying and empowering people to try to bring their best in order to create new solutions. So culture is about new ways of leading, new ways of working, new ways of learning, new ways of living. So and this is what companies are realizing, that we need to, in order to transform the organization for this complex environment that we are facing, not only within the organizations, but in the society, we need different ways of doing things.
So what does a culture look like that has this kind of egolessness to it, I guess? Also,
Yeah, if I may, I think the leaders must inspire the employees. So we are changing the way we manage. So instead of command control, you know everything and the others just do it. No, it's the opposite. You inspire, you work with, you share ideas. It's one team working together, creating new ideas to solve, as Luciana said, complex problems. There could be inside the company, inside your team, collaborating, environment system, and working with other teams in the company. So it's a different style. So leaders should understand that new generations, they come with this mindset. So they should engage in this way to have better productivity in the company.
it sounds like a very anti-competitive kind of leadership as well, because so much, in the other parts of my career as a college teacher in business programs, one of the main sources that I have for my case studies of how things go horribly wrong is when ego and control and taking credit and competition to advance one's own career begins taking precedence for employees, whether they're at any level of the company, whether they're in leadership positions, decision-making positions, management, middle positions, or wherever. When that kind of need for personal advancement and personal credit kind of takes precedence over that. And I know there are business management norms that kind of put this competitiveness to the forefront, right? That say, we will regularly evaluate employees based, competing against each other. This one achieved this much on the performance metrics, therefore they get a certain kind of reward. This person didn't do so well on these important metrics, therefore they don't get this reward. They might get some kind of negative consequence as well. Many listeners out there might have been on the receiving end of some of those negative consequences. And there's always temptation in those competitive environments to kind of break the kind of teamwork that you're saying needs to happen in a flexible business. So what I'm wondering is, we can sit here and talk about collaboration and how wonderful it is, and teamwork and how wonderful it is, until, we run our time on the studio and they kick us out. But, and we certainly could, and I'm sure many people have, but where we really, I think, need to get in here as business professionals and folks advising on leadership is, how do you manage the kind of cultural change in a company to shift from a more competitive way of organizing people into this more cooperative way of organizing folks? And I want to just throw it out to all three of you to argue among yourselves as to how to do this, because that to me seems like the most difficult part of this problem to solve. How do you overcome the inertia in an organization that's been competition minded for so long. And we live in a society where people worship the virtues that come from competition to the point where we've forgotten how to be critical about it.
Yeah, this is interesting. And I will let Wagner to talk, but just a comment on how you measure the performance of someone like this. It's not only about what this person delivers, but how this person delivers, how this person behaves in a team in order to get the best for the company, for the solution they are working for. So it's driven by results, no discussion, but the behaviors you demonstrate in order to make your best matters.
Yeah.
What's crossing my mind is I'm a little more optimistic about where we are because the new workforce naturally are going to engage in different ways of doing work. They're already showing. In my book, I talk about the 5 Ds. They are distributed, so they do asynchronous work. Senior leaders are not used to that yet, but we need to start getting used to the synchronous world. And they are dynamic. So they're thinking about their careers in months. And like the first year is to look into the second year and what do I need to get to the next position. So we need to start adapting to the new workforce because their ways of working is already changing the culture. So I don't think culture has to be top down. I think the top needs to be worried about culture and worried about how they cultivate a different environment. But culture is emerging from the new workforce just by the fact that we are in a transition because new ways of working don't come with the playbook.
Yeah.
And if you think about the 5 Ds, as I said, they're distributed, they're dynamic, they're diverse, they're really digital natives. So we need to work on the cross-generational digital fluency. That's really important. Don't leave anybody behind. But the last one is my favorite, is discerning. I think the new workforce is very discerning. They have access to information. They have access to thinking differently about where they're going to position themselves to be purposeful. They're looking for meaningful work. So I think I'm more optimistic because it's not going to come from leaders suddenly being enlightened about a new way of leading. It's about adapting to the new workforce and understanding that competition doesn't go away. People love to be engaged in competitive environments, but what they need is to feel that their agency is going to be valued, and they will do their best work with colleagues because now we are getting this consciousness of collective behavior.
Yeah.
And I think I'm optimistic because I think it's just a natural progression of things.
And how we transform, then you ask about the transformation. You have to be, the senior leaders should start and leading by example. So this is critical to change culture. We have to change from the top, and they should believe that, and others will lead, will see as an example, and we will act the same way. And if we think about the new generation, they are coming with this new idea, and we need to change the top leaders first. So we can change the whole organization. It's on purpose. You need to establish a strategy, and you need to cultivate, and you need to deploy, and in all organization in order to change the way the organization works.
There's a powerful humility emerging from this theme, I think, that's very important, and it's not. I'm glad you guys are optimistic about the nature of this change, because I can bring my natural pessimism as a host to kind of see the resistance to this, because there's a term in English that I was thinking of as you guys were speaking, which I see some of if there is resistance to this more collaborative way of working and this more collaborative way of building business projects, and it emerges from anything in human nature. The term I'm thinking of is peacocking. If you're familiar, there might be an equivalent expression in Portuguese and Spanish that you're familiar with, but it's the notion of someone who uses their achievements in business or wherever other achievements they have as a means of kind of displaying an ego and displaying a kind of personality and a sort of dominance gesture. And there is a strong trend instead in what you guys are giving me towards humility and a kind of strength through the refusal of dominance that I find is, I'm always grateful to hear it, because that's kind of my own natural approach to, solving business problems or practical problems of any kind. But I also sometimes consider myself a bit of a weird person in the room when I, look at certain trends that have existed over the years and think about certain negative experiences I've had in my own career history myself, and thinking, well, the biggest issue always seems to be the ego gets in the way of the company's achievements. And if you let the company become about just one person, or you let the division or the performance become about just one person, then competitiveness turns to a kind of display of personality. I'm trying to find the most tactful way of saying this, because I am trying to be tactful. I don't necessarily want anyone to be offended. The offense comes later in the series. Because what I want to get down here is what does it mean to be a leader without an ego?
Mm-hmm. But I love this discussion, because I think what you're talking about is, there are two things. We cannot discard the idea that the people bringing new ways of working, bringing new ideas, also have egos. And sometimes we have this righteousness behavior that's not suiting to an organization transformation. Because you can't transform an organization by just imposing your ideas. So I think that's the beauty of developing leaders differently.
Yeah.
We primarily, until now, we send them to training, we tell them capabilities that they need to follow, and we insist in changing their behavior through these initiatives. Initiatives don't change behavior. What changes behavior is experiences that lead them to new insights. If we can bring leaders to experiences that bring them new insights, they will contemplate change. Change doesn't happen because you told them to change. It happens because they gain awareness of something that could possibly help the organization.
Yeah.
You see, it's a different way of approaching people. Start where they are.
Yeah. There's a kind of transformation that you're describing, a kind of like someone regenerating themselves into a different kind of person than they might have been before.
Yeah.
I've been working with the corporate social responsibility and citizenship for a while, and I've met a lot of people, and many of those people, they just realize they have to change when something very critical happens in their life, disease in a family, something, and they start working with nonprofits, supporting nonprofits. So it doesn't have to be always this way. If you change, if you have a self-awareness, if you experience, and if you have empathy for the others, you can start from now. You don't need to wait until something happens to change. It's the same thing with the leadership. You don't need to lose talents, lose people, lose people with the right skills to start realizing you have to change. So it's the same thing that we have to increase and work in the self-awareness, improving our behavior, and what is our purpose in the company. And if I don't count the cost of losing talent is huge. You will be having more costs when you will be hiring, and talent acquisition is costly.
Yeah, and it's also about to be more self-aware on what is happening around you. So we just mentioned about the new generation, but I would say all generations have changed their mind, particularly after pandemic. And we have different expectations on how to be successful, or how to be more happy with the work and the way we deliver value to the companies, to the organizations, to the society. We have different expectations on how organization works. And I think this is a challenge for every organization today. So they are all looking for high productivity, embracing technology, which is a trend and it's going to happen. But we also need to make people engaged and connected, healthy, mentally health, in an environment that they want to continue and do not move to another company.
Yeah.
So I think the challenge of the new leader is be more self-aware on what's going to happen and how they can adapt their leadership style in order to enable most of innovation and productivity and ensure the longevity of the businesses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me think of an idea that I've been thinking of for a while right now, which is, if we can think of what is the most sort of difficult social transformation in businesses and in our society in general at this point in time, one of the biggest challenges we have are folks who want that greater level of connections, who have reevaluated that kind of priority in life, right? Because I've worked with folks over the years and I've met folks over the years who have looked at their career as, an intense work-based thing, right? And I think that is one of the big issues, the notion that comes up here, one of the bigger political issues, if I can root this a little bit in where 25th Century's home is in Southern Ontario. It's navigating the conflict between folks who have an old-fashioned attitude about what the good life is, of having, say, a big house that's far away from where you work, and you drive 2 to 3 hours a day to get to work, and you go there every day where you work under supervision and monitoring, and everyone knows what you're doing all the time. And then there is this new push, and the pandemic definitely enabled this, for many reasons. Number one, the technological methods of the fact that we needed to work by distance a lot more for our public safety. And then we all started to see the benefits of having these more hybridized workplaces where, we could have sort of localized workplace hubs or home-based workplace hubs, and that would supplement a central office location, but also people just wanting to live nearer to where they work and be less alienated from their communities. And the big challenge I think we face as a society is between folks who have made that transition and that change of priorities and folks who don't understand why the priorities would change. It's there's the fossilized attitude of like, well, but this was what we defined the good life as. This is what I grew up. Are you telling me that the values that I grew up with and the aspirations that I grew up with are somehow mistaken? Like, I've met executives over the years who work in Toronto, but whose home is almost all the way around the lake as far as Welland. And they would spend hours upon hours a day driving to work 5 days a week. And even before the pandemic, I thought to myself, who considers this a good life? If I have kids, I want to see them, right? If I have a flexible workplace that allows this kind of asynchronous work, I'm going to take advantage of that because my sources of happiness are more than just my job. And my sources of happiness are certainly not driving on the 401 for hours every day on a commute because, I can speak for myself personally, I am not a fan of risking my life every day. But that's my standard joke about driving on the 401. And highway driving to commute in general is like, how many fatalities is the news radio reporting today?
But Adam, can we talk about this? Because I think it now is the whole social construct that we create for ourselves. Because values comes from your context growing up, your emotional development. I talk about this because I think this is very important. But you have to start challenging those beliefs that you acquire from growing up, from your skills building, and from your education. But I have to say, what is happening to me, at least, is that we need to treat individuals as individuals and let go of the idea there is a certain way of doing anything. Because what you're saying about driving, not driving, some people love driving. I like driving, and I put a podcast, and I used to drive an hour and a half to go to a company that I used to work for. It wasn't terrible because I know what the trade-offs were. you have to start giving people the opportunity to make those choices. Make your choices. If your choice is to not drive an hour, if your choice is not to sacrifice your family, if your choice is actually not to do either, but to balance working life and say, hey, I can still have pleasure in working collocated and manage my family life appropriately. So I think what we need to start thinking is that diversity, for example, because now you're talking about diversity, you're talking about all this. We all have our values, we all have our perspectives. So let's not impose our perspectives on anyone, but respect your own and respect others.
Yeah.
And then make your own decisions. I think we would be much better off than trying to impose our opinions and perspectives on other people.
Yeah.
That's my solution for the workplace.
You know, I love the concept of working design. So
Yes.
let's go to the office when we have a good reason for that. And have all people there to work in a collaborative way, doing things that it requires our presence. Instead of just make this an obligation, then the person drives an hour and a half and stay in front of the computer in teleconference all day long. So without interaction with anyone. So I love the way you put in terms of respect people's choice. And this requires that the company be self-aware that they cannot give career opportunities just for those that are there every day in presence, and just look at the possibility of being flexible for those that need this flexibility, so they start to be behind because of they made their choices, which is the balance, you know.
Equity in opportunities.
This is about equal opportunity. So when we think on an inclusive culture, we need to ensure we are treating everybody in the same way, giving them the same opportunity to demonstrate their value, their outcomes, their achievements.
Yeah, and if you have the right skills, the right people, you have to trust them. So it's about trust. So
Now we're talking because it comes down to trust.
Just how do we teach trust? Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, because talking about the leadership style that we just spoke, the traditional way of leading, the leader used to see and stay with their teams in a daily basis and thinking that if they are watching, if they are working, they are really working. But if they are at home, they are not working. So working remotely requires that people understand their responsibility, they are committed to deliver their outcomes, and it requires also a different leadership style that is based on trust and a different way of leading, because it requires different approach and treat people as individuals and no longer in a massive way.
Yeah. How do you think we teach folks how to trust folks in this way? This is again, I think it's the most difficult part of the whole program, because I love everything that I hear about this. Because it's about creating a workplace and about creating a relationship between a company and its workers that are based on achievement, right? I'm not tracking your time that you spend while I'm watching you. I'm tracking what it is that you're actually doing. What are your achievements and what is the quality of that achievement, right? But how do we teach the trust that's necessary to transition, right? How do we teach the trust that's necessary to transition? It goes back to some of the points I've already made.
But that's why I'm optimistic, because now we are recognizing the role of reflection, the role of self-reflection, the role of mindfulness, the role of silence, because you're not going to force people to trust others just by telling them they should. That doesn't work that way. But it's your whole experience. We are human beings who act emotionally most of the time and subconsciously. Most of our actions are unconsciously driven. So we need to go back and say, where did I learn the beliefs that I have about myself, about others? Where did I learn that I cannot trust others? Start there. When did I start learning that I couldn't trust others? Because if you appeal to leaders to be a little more self-reflective, they will naturally find sources of these insecurities. We all are insecure, but you learn not to trust others. Humans are usually trusting as children,
Yeah.
but we learn not to. So you cannot force people, but you can engage them in self-reflection. And I've seen so many cases when you are right there, attuned to their emotions, things start happening. The problem is that we don't have that system that allows for that reflection yet. But I'm very hopeful.
Self-confidence is also
Yes.
important for leaders. So
Yes.
if they trust in themselves and if they lead, they will start looking the other in the different way, and they can start trusting.
The organization also can do their party. So I think performance management, it's not the same. They need to review the way they make clear what is expected from the person and what are the behaviors expected and how they will be measured. So if they know exactly what is the new rule, the new guideline, I think leaders will be also become more comfortable that I know that Alcely is working on this. I know that I will get what I needed because we have agreed it already about it.
But this is great. Okay, let's talk about this because the American Psychological Association just did the report of the workforce in 2024. 49% of employees don't know what's expected of them.
Don't know.
Don't know. So you have half of your population in the workplace not knowing what's expected of them. How insecure you feel when you don't know what's expected of you. You spend all your energy trying to figure it out. Doesn't give you confidence that you're doing the right work or at the right pace or the right time.
Yeah.
Now, self-confidence. I need to say this because it's so important. It's not about knowledge. I think senior leaders grew up with thinking that leadership is about power and self-confidence is about knowledge. No, it's not. Self-confidence is about the belief that you have that you can learn and the belief that you are in the place that you belong. That's self-confidence. It's not about knowledge. So we have to shift even the dialogue
And the
because
understanding.
people don't understand what's expected of them. Leaders don't understand what is expected of them. I remember working for a CEO who said, I have bosses. My board of directors, my bosses. I need to be attuned to what my stakeholders, my directors are expecting of me. So nobody's immune to insecurities.
Yeah.
And when leaders start showing vulnerability and showing that they are also learners, then things start shifting. But it's very hard. You don't teach people how to be a learner. You teach people to start reflecting on becoming a learner.
Yeah. It's a fascinating attitude to try to cultivate in someone because it really is like overcoming so much of the way folks have been raised and socialized in our society for so long. You know, it almost reminds me of a conversation I had with my wife's father, actually, who was kind of an elderly person, who, was reflecting on how some of the ways in which his father raised him and the way that family dynamic was shaped around the notion that, this father figure is the leader who should always know what is done and what is to be done and how to direct others and how to do it. And, one of the things that, he and I were talking about is that seems like such a high pressure way to live. Think of how many, I sometimes think would cardiac arrest and heart attack statistics for men and outcomes be improved simply by encouraging more of us to, collaborate rather than be expected to have the definitive answer all the time, right? And be under that kind of pressure. Because I think so much of the reaction to the ideas that y'all are bringing to the table here and bringing to the microphones here is along the lines of, but if you ask me to take my ego away, if you ask me to no longer be a director, to channel someone by a team instead of direct and give orders and say what to do, then that takes away what I'm supposed to be as a leader, doesn't it? And I'm like, I think we're like, no, it's not. It is leading without ego, leading without direction. it can be very intimidating to ask someone to kind of conduct a storm in this way. But this is about channeling the energy and the contributions of many people in a way that does not take all that burden of channeling it only onto yourself. It's about sharing burdens and sharing responsibilities by channeling all that attitudes and sharing creativities. To me, it speaks to some of the points that we talked about when we were kind of planning what we were going to talk about today. Yeah. When you mentioned some of our points about, how do we find ways to incorporate people of all genders into the workplace, right? What kind of benefits do we get from that? We get not only the immediate sense of there is a really smart person of a non-male gender out there who can make incredible contributions to this company, and by making things more welcoming for them or her, we can create all these new possibilities for the company itself. But also it opens us up to say, you don't need to, being in charge does not mean giving directions. Being in charge does not mean taking the burden of action all upon yourself.
And I love that you're talking about non-binary. Let's talk about that, because it's almost like a metaphor for the ways we need to start thinking about leadership.
Yeah.
Because binary thinking, it led to where we are today. One thing is good, one thing is bad. Gender identity is the same. We talk about non-binary. It's like, if you don't understand, there is so much conflict today in society. It's like, if you step back, it's not about you. Is allowing non-binary thinking, non-binary gender identity to come to fruition naturally, and has no impact on you unless you feel that this is going to threaten you somehow. So that comes neuroplasticity. Let's talk about that. How do you teach leaders to think differently? Allowing them to actually try with little courageous steps to try new ways of addressing things, because at the end of the day, that's how your brain works. And if neuroplasticity, if you have the habits becoming part of your routine, little by little, your brain starts shifting the way we react to things, and we don't feel threatened by so many things that don't belong to our repertoire, because that's what basically it is, right?
Yeah.
If something's strange to me, it's a threat. It shouldn't be like that. If it's strange, be curious. I would like to know more about this strange thing.
Yeah, it's an opportunity. It gets back to your point about insecurities, right?
Yes.
If we're insecure about ourselves, and this as well gets to something that I was thinking about while we were talking about confidence, right? Confidence too often is confused with that kind of self-certainty.
Exactly.
Confidence is really the ability to sort of step back from certainty and say, what can I learn? How can this new way of thinking that I don't fully understand, how can this empower me in ways that I might not necessarily be expecting? Because it can be scary to open yourself to that kind of uncertainty, because change is difficult. You don't necessarily know what you will create or awaken inside yourself, even when you adapt to a different kind of business model or workplace relationship model than you've been accustomed to in the past, right? The first really harsh reactions to remote work, when we all had to do it all at the same time at the height of the pandemic, was folks who were trying to supervise people with the same kind of, eyes on me that you'd get from walking from cubicle to cubicle as you could by getting people to check into a Zoom room at a certain point in time and exercise that same kind of control. But where you have to exercise control is a place where you haven't learned to trust.
Yeah, and another question leaders should ask is why I'm doing that. Because in corporations, you work automatically. We don't know why I'm here. So they
That's
should...
that 49%, yeah.
So sometimes when you stop and say, why I'm doing this, and can I grow doing this, how I can interact and learning from others, this changes everything in your life. So this is...
I like the way you approach it, and also why I need a diverse team. I love the 3 pillars. It's about talent, it's about innovation, and it's about business. So if you segregate your population and you just looking after just one type of profile, you lose the ability to find wonderful talent in the marketplace. If you don't value different perspectives, you lose the ability of drive innovative solutions that reflects the society. And if you don't have a diverse team that make all this built on innovation and talent, you also lose the ability to make business, because there are lots of researches in the marketplace that shows that we buy from other companies, other people that are on behalf of this company that have same beliefs.
Yeah.
So it's all about business and also how to make the best of this approach for our companies and also for the society.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that actually might be a wonderful place for us to kind of end our conversation together right now. And I think I will just thank you all for being here, taking the time to do this with me and to go over all of these issues. So I want to thank Luciana. Luciana Camargo. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for
coming by to our location, our current studio here. And thank you, Alcely Barroso, for the same. Thank you, Wagner Denuzzo, for also the same. I know all of your schedules are so absurdly busy, and I'm thankful that you could come and have this conversation and these various conversations with us today. And I know we'll be talking in the future, whether it's on the record or on the microphone here, or whether it's in other circumstances as well. Thank you all for being here very much. And if I just want to plug your book one more time, because why should I not? That would be Leading to Succeed, Essential Skills from the New Workplace. Wagner Denuzzo, always happy for a little bit of sponsorship on there, always happy for a plug.
Thank you.
Both for our laptops and for our books. Ayo. All right. And on that terrible joke, I want to thank everybody. Thank you very much for being here. It's been a pleasure. This has been the first episode of what will be our continuing series here on the future of work, labor, and productivity, going into the rest of the 21st here at 25th Century. Thank you all so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can also download or watch any podcast of 25th Century Magazine at all your favorite podcast venues. Most specifically, we are on Podbean, we are on Spotify, and you can even watch our ugly faces at the 25th Century Magazine YouTube channel. You can go to YouTube, go to Podbean, go to Spotify, and search 25th Century Magazine. You will find us, I would say, immediately. While there, you can watch the latest episodes. If you're into it, you can catch up on some of our back episodes and see some of the great conversations we have already had with a lot of interesting people about visions for the future that are a better world for all of us than certainly the one we're currently experiencing right now, and a better future for all of us here. So thank you to all of our sponsors. Thank you to all of our venues and our listeners. Remember, we are on Podbean, we are on Spotify, and we are on YouTube. You can search us there at 25th Century Magazine or 25th Century Podcast. Thank you.